Hey Messiah, we're keeping our community strong by staying connected to one another and connected to Jesus. Today's video devotion comes to us from Jim Gill.
Hi Messiah. Today's reading is from Luke chapter 23. Then the whole company of them arose and brought him before Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We know this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king." And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no guilt in this man." But they were urgent, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee even to this place." When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction. He sent him over to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at the time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him, because he had heard about him, and he was hoping to see some sign done by him. So he questioned him at some length, but he made no answer. The chief priests and the scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. And Herod with his soldiers treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then, arraying him in splendid clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. And Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that very day, for before this they had been at enmity with each other. Well, Pilate called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people and said to them, "You brought me this man who was misleading the people. After examining him before you, behold, I do not find this man guilty of any charges against him. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore punish and release him." But they cried out together, "Away with this man, and release to us Barabbas," a man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection started in the city and for murder. Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, "Crucify, crucify him." A third time he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no guilt deserving death. I will therefore punish him and release him." But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified. Their voices prevailed. So Pilate decided that their demand should be granted. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over to their will. Failure. Everywhere. Pilate had the authority. He had no trouble in the past upsetting the people under his control. The peace of Rome had its costs, and he had no trouble deciding who would pay them. Well, instead of making a tough decision, his decision to make, he lets a petty ethnic tyrant have a go at it, Herod. Failure. Herod, play acting as a king of the Jews, probably not even an ancestor of David, he finally has an opportunity to see the man that he had heard about. And of course, he was a threat, but maybe he was a threat Herod could use, or maybe he really was the one Herod was pretending to be. If that were true, he could no longer pretend to be king. But wouldn't it be worth it? Even if he couldn't be king, surely it'd be nice to throw off the shackles of Rome. Failure. Pilate, again, tries to do the right thing, the unpopular thing. So close to success, but succumbed to the crowd. Maybe he calculated this miscarriage of justice wasn't the worst that could happen. Maybe he really was thinking a few steps ahead. Failure. Jesus. He commanded the winds and the waves. He could have stopped it. Failure. So much opportunity, so much failure. I don't know about you, but this seems pretty timely to me now. How much failure do we see all around us? Our leaders failing. People who we thought were our friends failing. Ourselves failing. So much failure. But of course, the story we just read, we know that God was setting his most incredible gift in motion and his promise to overcome death. He has promised that his church will not perish. We see failure, yes, but we are not in charge. Two things to think about. Who has failed us? Were we right to put our trust in them? Can we turn that broken trust to a God who will not fail us? And who have we failed? How can God help us make it right? Please pray with me. Father, you are no stranger to our failure. Thank you for showing us that even though we fail, you have promised to redeem us. Help us to trust your promise that our failure is no match for the love that you have for us in Jesus. Amen.